being traditional and, having our ancestral ways. It's cool to, use the model of the church in a sense to kind of protect it. Because like I said before incorporating and become a religious nonprofit, we were already protected by the Native Religious Freedom Law Act of 1973. And so, like I said, just to take it into that other protection as far as, like I said, using the state of California, going into the religious nonprofit and utilizing that to just provide an extra barrier, with the religion, with the church. And so as far as that, everything's been smooth. We've been operating since 2019. And, like I said, it's been a good round as far as helping people get back to natural earth-based medicine and just seeing that people are, hungry for that and glad to have the space and, the spot to where people can learn about that and reconnect and grow and try to be the best versions of themselves.
And I wanted to, one thing I wanted to add is that, when we talk about like formalizing under a nonprofit religious model, things like that, it's good for communities of people who are gathering. But please understand, this is very important, is that your right to exercise religion is an individual liberty guaranteed in the First Amendment to the Constitution. All of the 10 First Amendments, all of the first 10 amendments are individual rights and liberties. And the Supreme Court has been very clear in stating that basically it's like this: your beliefs and your practices, whatever that is, whether it's believed or practiced by any other individual in this universe, is irrelevant, is still worthy of protection under the Constitution. As long as you're found to be sincere and that your beliefs and practices rise to the level of being religious under the law, then you're protected in that activity. And so that's kind of been the my aim or my focus has been on the definition of religion under the First Amendment, because I see that as being one of the more major issues in this larger battle that we're doing. But me growing up, I grew up in Northeast Texas in a predominantly Christian, society. And my parents weren't uber religious. We did go to church periodically on holidays and stuff like that. So I never really had a bad organized religion or religious experience like kind of growing up. But I didn't like how judgmental I found a lot of the Christian people in my area to be. That was always just, I guess, if there was anything negative about my experiences with religion growing up, it was the judging of others. Always didn't sit well with me spiritually.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, everyone. You alluded to something. As a lawyer, you're working with people that might be under persecution of the law. And I know there was a case that came up recently where there was a woman who had been growing at home, and I think she was a teacher, and it was a pretty visible case for a while, and I don't really remember how it spun out. But I think maybe part of what people could be thinking about here today is, how do I protect myself with the understanding that the idea of religion, at least in this country, for most people, could be some kind of shelter where there's, the loophole is not the right word, but I don't know what the word is.
No, I'll tell you. To protect yourself is one, stand in honesty and integrity at all times. But look, here is why the use of, and I guarantee you 99.9% of the people at this conference use them spiritually, religiously under law, because it's basically this, like I said earlier. If you're consuming these substances for the purpose of helping you answer some of life's questions and seeking guidance from contact with the divine or entities, whatever that might be for you, that is the religious use of entheogens or psychedelics, right? So, what can individuals do? I mean, I don't know. I've seen people go to sign affidavits talking about their beliefs, but it's just this, y'all. This is sacred to me. I consume this because I have certain questions in life that are part of the human condition that this experience helps me answer and helps guides me. That is the religious use of entheogens, psychedelics, and that's all there is to it. And then the courts said it in the Myers opinion, which is a defining religion case that a lot of people and myself rely on. They say it in there. They say, like the ancient, mushroom religions in Mexico, it's because they would enter these transient states where they receive this guidance. No different than, if you're a Christian, if you're going through a divorce, how should I treat my wife, or blah, blah. in the Bible, and the Bible helps guide you. That's the same. So on a very fundamental level, the entheogens and these holy books serve the same function. We can argue all day one's more effective than the other at effectuating change, but on a fundamental level, there is no difference between those two types of religious practices, if that makes sense.
And you're saying practically that could be a defense?
Yes. So knowing what I know about defining religion, which I've done a lot of research and written a book about, if that's the case, if that is your intention in consuming that sacrament, and granted you're being safe and you're not distributing this substance all over the place, yes, that it could definitely be a very valid defense. Absolutely.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Who was here this morning for the Ian McCall keynote at the beginning of the day? Was anyone here for that? It was stunning. But Shane mentioned earlier that you've worked with Ian personally. He's come to you and done work with you, is that correct?
Yeah, he's done it multiple times himself, his brother, and he's brought a couple of different people in. And yeah, I've been working with him since, I think, 2019. So I met him. That's when I met him, 2019.
So it's for me, I wasn't planning on moderating this panel, but so I'm flying into it. But my background religiously was being raised Catholic, okay? And I went to Catholic. Everybody in my family was Catholic. They used to be Jewish, but they converted to Catholicism, half of them. But so Catholic, and then kindergarten through 8th grade, and doing all the sacraments, and really being devout, and going and having my first confession, and telling all the bad things I did to my sister, and then coming out and feeling like I was filled with the Holy Spirit. Absolutely feeling a psychedelic experience of being, illuminated, right? And then I got interested in music and girls, and everything changed later, and went to public school. But that's my framework for imagining what it means to be involved in a religious organization. And I just want to say, go ahead, Greg. Go ahead.
So one thing, and I, when we talk about what is a religion, what it is under the law, ultimately it's religion by analogy, meaning that these long-standing religions kind of provide guideposts for the court in determining whether this was a religion or not, right? And so I tell people, like with the Catholic Church, they're serving alcohol to minors. You know what I mean? They do. And there's nothing wrong, no judgment there. You see what I mean? But you can always think, okay, this is what, because a lot of the questions I get from people I work with, so they're like, okay, well, what if we do this? Will this be seen as religious? Or if we have this type of get together, is this? And I just tell them, look, it's all religion by analogy. If you, they ask me oh, can we have a retreat? I mean, do Christian churches have retreats? You see what I mean? So yeah, so a lot of it's religion by analogy, but like I say, I say that too. Second, and it's kind of like the wine that's drank is handmade. You know what I mean? Wine doesn't come out of the ground. It's not a natural earth sacrament per se. It's actually made, by humans. And so that's another thing. It's like when we talk about, a lot of times people ask me, does it have to be natural earth to be protected, or can you have synthetic? And I can tell you, the court would never look at whether it's natural earth or synthetic. The court would look at what's the intention, what's the experience that it's producing, right? Because that's ultimately what the difference between religious and non-religious use of entheogens or psychedelic boils down to.
It's nice to sit close to a cool lawyer's mind and see the dots connected. Shane, I was trying to go to a more noble destination in my own ranting about adolescence. But, religion or a religious organization or a community of people that share a certain set of values, I imagine that can be a very beautiful experience. For a lot of us, it isn't, but I would imagine that it can be. Can you speak to some of the more, the pieces of your experience of the idea of religion that give you hope or affirmation or pride or joy?
Well, I think, for myself, just like a brief of my religious background. So I grew up Catholic, went catechism, communion, brought into the church, and then from there left, went into Christian school, went through all that, and then outside of all that, like I said, I came back into the medicine, and from there, that's where I was revamped back into my identity as a Native man and my traditions of who I was as a indigenous person and who I am today. And so, what I see is one thing I kind of don't really understand about, a lot of the religions that aren't necessarily from this land base, because I always tell people, like, you read the Bible and whatnot, you read all these, those are Eastern stories. And like I said, God had his children over here. And where are those stories at? Where are those stories of, God's children here and how they communed with God and how they had their way with God? And, so that's where I like to have that, hope to show, all of God's children of, we're still here and we're still practicing our ways. And I think people need to see that, because every religion, before it became what people see today, it came back to fire, it came back to ceremonies, it came back to understanding, whether it's Christian, Catholic, Hebrew, everything. You go back beyond all the books and the scriptures, they were doing ceremony. They were doing things, whether it was good ceremony or it was bad ceremony. Because, like I said, just because you're behind this thing doesn't mean that your people don't know about bad ceremonies or don't know about witchcraft and don't know about all this other stuff out there that plays a big role within the confusion and the mistrusion of the message of God and the truth to give to God's children. And that's where I think, like I said, for what I've seen within my church, because I don't just help natives. Like I said, I help all walks of life of people who come to my church. Church of the people. I said it's not church of the blacks, whites, Jews. It's church of the people. We're all the people. Even traditional names throughout the world usually translate to the people. You know what I mean? And so that's where I'm trying to bring that back to show people that you come from this and you can indulge in this as well. It's your God-given right to have this. And I believe that maybe we're the ones to bridge that gap, because obviously when God's children came on the ships, they weren't presenting that way of life that we had already known for thousands of years and breathed and lived and died, raised our young, and everything in between before someone ever said, you're wrong, you're evil, you're the devil, you don't know about God, when it's like our whole life revolves around God. It's just not how you think of God, but we knew what God's name was in our language, you know what I mean? So that's where now, I think that's where the bridge is being gapped through my church and being able to show people the truth and show people that we got to come together instead of acting like one knows more than the other. Because at the end of the day, most of us really don't know God in that nature. Like how we could sit here and talk, it's like we don't always have that. I always tell people there's three things. You're either gifted, you have a near-death experience, or you're taking some type of mind-altering substance, you know what I mean? And if not, then chances are you never really came in contact with God or a greater spirit. And like I said, those three categories, those are chances are you'll hear a story of God or the divine and all those three categories, but so that's kind of where I stand as far as presenting that with my church and giving that aspect of community of honoring God a natural way instead of being in some building that is all artificial and doesn't even represent the earth, doesn't even represent God's creations. You got a nice panel glass, what does that got to do with God? You know what I mean? You got a nice choir, what does that got to do with God? You know what I mean? What does that got to do with people who are dying and need God and need this? What is that? You can make millions every year, you donate a couple. What does that have to do with people who are dying right now who need God? And now it's time we stand up for God and the people. And that's what I hope, that's what we're doing at Church of the People,
Shane, how does your... Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Shane, how does your own family and peer group, how do you relate to them with the work that you've taken on for yourself? Like, what kind of conversations come up for you with loved ones around... I don't know what your family is like and your peer group, but how do you share with others what you do and what you prioritize in your life?
I mean, I just start with basically with how I live my life through my examples, or, people actually come to me because people know what I do. So people, if someone dies or someone's going through some tough times or people are kind of struggling, they'll come to me and mention, what it may be, like, oh, I'm going through this, or I just lost my dad, I just lost my aunt, or this or that or that or this. And so it's really cool to, like I said, being able to express that to people of there's this way, our people have been dealing with sickness and trauma in many ways for thousands of years, way even before the Europeans and everyone came. We were still dealing with death and sickness and war. So like I said, we had ways to combat that, whether it was psychologically, mentally, physically, and spiritually. So it's kind of cool to, like I said, be able to offer that back to the people or just anybody. It's not just my own community. It's, friends from all over the states. It's friends who are out of state, all over the country. It's people just reach out for certain things, whether it's, how do I get more connected, or how do I take this medicine in a more natural way, or how can I, get the best natural experience possible, or how do I get to 15 grams, how do I get to 20 grams, because we've gone all the way up to 30 grams at a church, so it's like, we take big doses, but we work with all different doses, and everyone gets to choose their dose, but no, it's really good to be able to offer that advice to people naturally, rather than like, hey man, go to MAPS and take Comp 360. Hey, no, just kidding.
It's just nice to think about. I think for me, I always felt like church. Sorry to keep going back to church, but my experience of religion always felt like such a missed opportunity, because it was one place where there was so much grave seriousness, but it wasn't on any of the things that I felt like needed to be treated with grave seriousness. Ian, when you welcome new parishioners into the church, do you deal with a lot of veterans specifically who are looking for a community that's church-like, or that's something that is analogous to maybe something they grew up with, or are they still holding beliefs that they once held, or is it a total transformation? What's that synthesis like when people come into your community?
Sure. I think the challenge is right, as everyone's alluded to, is that people have these potentially negative religious experiences growing up. And so they kind of have that perspective or bias coming in. And so, yeah, if you try to talk to a combat veteran who's done 6, deployments, right, and has been blown up with IEDs and is on all sorts of meds, if you get too woo-woo, they just will completely turn off. So I think being able to explain, church is a technical term. Church is a technical term in the United States that can refer to a temple, a mosque, TP, anything. It's not something that only means it's a Christian church. And so, for them, it's understanding that it's a spiritual community of like-minded individuals for a common cause that are supporting each other. That's really what a church is. And for them, it's all about the community that they lost, through their identity, right? They were a warrior, and they don't get reintegrated back in society. In traditional cultures here in America, after you fought in a war, you would be segregated from the rest of the people. You would have to be purified, consecrated, and then reintroduced back into society. And we don't have that. So like Shane said, they've been doing that for thousands of years here. And we're like, we showed up and took over the place and thought we knew better. And it's like we haven't even learned how to integrate our warriors. So, it's really a work in progress.
I wanted to say something, kind of what Shane was saying, alluding to earlier, is that, in our Church of Sacred Synthesis, we're non-dogmatic, right? Because the law does not require that you be dogmatic in order to be considered religious, right? So it's, we don't tell anybody what to believe or what not to believe. It's really providing a loving container for people who are working with entheogens in an intentional, purposeful, spiritual, religious way, to come together and share their experiences and try to answer these questions together as a community, right? Where no one answer is right or wrong, but we're all just trying to find that answer that makes. And people ask me all the time, what should I believe? Well, believe whatever makes you feel at peace inside of yourself and helps you to treat others the way that you want to be treated. And, working with entheogens, especially, like 5-MeO, where you reach these peak, unitive consciousness states, I tell people, like, that's my moral code comes from that one experience, right? Because when I experience unity with all of everything, like, that tells me all I need to know about how I need to treat another being. And so for us at our church, it's really based off that unitive consciousness. You know what I mean? Like, we let that be the guide of people morally, right? And again, not tell any one person what to believe. Again, another thing is that we know is that our experiences with psychedelics are a lot of them are the same, but a lot of them are very different. What you might experience at a ceremony, it might tell me something completely different, right? So it's like there's no certain set of beliefs because it's just so unique and addresses each person as they are, right? So it kind of it transcends being able to write down, like a Ten Commandments or something like that, right? If that makes sense.
And Greg, you mentioned something that I was going to try to build on anyway. How do you three think that the experience of what we're calling psychedelics this weekend have informed some values that people might associate with divinity? And how does that affect your interrelations with other people? What has opened or changed in you? What have you seen grow or flourish? What's the highest value that you found in your own ceremonial experiences that makes sense in this context?
You want me to go first? It doesn't matter. Yeah, I'll go ahead and go. And I guess I think I understand what your question is. I'm going to allude back to unitive consciousness. It's just like, I've heard the golden rule my whole life, but to experience it through, feeling that unitive consciousness, to kind of on a metaphysical level truly understand that we are all one. And two, I would say gratitude. Gratitude is such a powerful emotion, and part of my spiritual journey has just been staying aware enough to where I can be grateful in the moment. You know what I mean? Because a lot of us are good about a week after a blessing to be like, man, what a blessing. I'm so grateful for that. But just like, my psychedelic journey's brought me to a place to where I try to stay present enough to really feel gratitude in the moment of the receiving of the blessing. And so I guess if that answers your question, that's
Absolutely.
Okay.
You
Okay.
began to answer it and you helped form it, so thank you very much. Shane?
For me, I think, what I think a lot of people, and what I've noticed through my work is, at some point in, everybody's life, I've noticed there's a high drive, for the higher power, or at least a moment where, God, Creator's coming in somehow, some way, and is trying to get them in many different forms, and whether they accept it or pushed away and went on with their life. I think that appeals to people. The fact that that I went through the whole Catholic and Christian system and was no closer to God. I felt farther away from God, and then to go into the traditional ways and then kind of get the whole feeling that the whole Bible and Jesus is your Savior, and for it to go beyond that into the greater power of creation, it was beautiful, because that's all I ever wanted. That's one reason why I wanted to be a Christian, why I wanted to be Catholic, because I wanted God to love me. I wanted God to accept me, to see me. So for me, I think for people who want to see and feel that, I think it's exciting for a human to know that there's a possibility that God sees them and hears them and feels them and sees exactly what they're doing, and that they're not alone, and that they're here, and that they're in a good place. So.
Thank you, Shane. Ian, would you like to add to that?
Sure. I think there's no better feeling that I've experienced other than being in ceremony and watching people heal, watching people release their demons, watching people grow. Like seeing our fellow species members be better makes you feel better. And, with veterans, that's huge, because the only group in the United States that's we know like how bad it is for the Native American communities as far as alcoholism, suicide, and substance abuse, unemployment, all these kind of things. The only group that's worse than them are veterans. And then the group that's the worst are the Native Americans that are veterans. And in some cases, the tribes, up to a third of the people are veterans. So the mental health crisis and all these crises are shown.
Natives are the highest enlisted minority in the military.
Exactly. So that intersection of those two groups shows where we need to focus the healing for the rest of society. But that's it for me. Just be next to people that they're getting better. I just want to say this, right? We're warm-blooded creatures that require high degrees of social cohesion to be able to deal with the high stress levels we're under, and we don't have that anymore. So these churches provide that kind of platform for that kind of connection, so we can actually heal people and grow that out.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. Through our church, we do have physical gatherings we call hycrodoses that people are doing around the country, but a lot of our stuff is online. And a lot of people literally are just lonely, man. Like literally need community. And I've helped, build tons of churches, and what I've noticed is that a lot of people come for the first ceremony, but they stay for the community. Just because you're finally get into a community, most of them, a community of people that you can just be yourself and loved and respected for exactly who you are. And then you can grow along natural lines, if that makes sense, like becoming your true, authentic self, as opposed to other environments that they have been in where, they not so much like that. But yeah, community is great for kids. I think community does more healing than the actual sacraments themselves, to be honest with you. But still, the sacraments are the way that we bring people in and bring everybody together to make that connection with people.
Does anyone have any questions they'd like to pose to the panelists while they're all together?
This is a really nice shirt, by the way. It's for you.
Testing. Can I be? Yeah, now I can be heard. I've got a question for each of you. The easy ones for you, the hard ones for you. I'll ask you first and you second. Are your ceremonies open to non-Native Americans?
Yes, we work with non-native. We work with everybody. There's no discrimination
All right,
in our
thank
church.
you. How do you get by with this in Austin, Texas without you getting busted?
What was that again?
How do you get by with this in Austin, Texas without getting busted? That where you located?
Our church is based out of Austin, Texas. Without getting busted, I mean, it's our religion. It's like I tell people. I'll say this right now. If you're telling me we live in a country where we can't consume a substance that's been scientifically shown to produce a religious mystical experience safely and privately, and that's illegal and wrong to do, then go ahead and lock me up. So, I guess that's why I haven't gotten busted, because they already know how sincere I am. Because at the end of the day, because at the end of the day, because I do the intake for our church, and I mean, we have people with terminal illnesses. You know what I mean? People with terminal illnesses that are like, I'm literally fearing my own mortality, and through a divine synchronicity found your church online, and like now here I am, and like, if helping those people, if sending sacrament to those people is illegal and wrong, then just lock me up. That's all I can say, is because I can tell you right now that you might be free and moving around, but if you're not able to consume psychedelics religiously, like, you're living in a mental prison of consciousness, right? Because we all know is that once you consume these and you open up to this whole other world, if that's not legal to be able to access that, then you're living already in a prison. And you might not ever know it, but you are. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'd love to make a comment as well, and I'm glad to hear, Shane, that you guys allow everyone. So I got to sit with peyote in 1995 with my mentor, Jerry Patchen, in a Cheyenne and Arapaho reservation in western Oklahoma that didn't have any blood requirements as far as being Native American. So he was in that church for over 20 years, and years after I sat with him, he had to leave the church because that Native American church decided to institute a minimum 25% Native American requirement because they're concerned. This is all the problem with all this government regulation. They're like, they're worried about, in effect, losing their status. So they're like, we're going to make a 25% requirement. And so then when all the ayahuasca people, right, UDV case and in the Santo Daime case in Oregon and in RIFRA, the Native American church people in general fought against the ayahuasca folks because they were not happy. They were afraid, legitimately so, that giving another group access to these medicines would compromise their status. So then this just the government rules are basically increasing tribalism, and it's basically getting people in the medicine community to fight against each other and to make separate things instead of bringing everyone together.
It's a fascinating topic, fascinating conversation. Thank you to our panelists very much, and thank you for being here to participate.
Thank y'all, yeah, thank y'all, and very, very grateful for Paul. We've had long conversations, but yeah, anytime he asks me to come speak or be on a panel, I'm here, so very grateful for him.
Awesome. We've got one more panel at 5 o'clock. Stick around. Thank you.
Thank y'all.